welcome back. Glad you're here. We're making some progress. We're starting on chapter 3 today, called A Man's Identity. Chapter 3 is a little long, so I split it into two parts, part A and part 2. A and part 2. Joke. We're going to look at this idea of that men are trying to hit a moving target. It's an undefined target. Look on page 18 with George Gilder and his quote, "Men lust, but they know not what for. They fight and compete, but they forget the prize. They chase power and glory, but miss the meaning of life." What's the meaning of life? Let's start with an easy question. In the crash of 2008, many men lost their financial well-being. This resulted in men actually taking their own lives and resulted in much uncertainty and much anxiety and depression. The quote on page 19 details this a little more. Down there in the little cutout section at the end starts, "In truth, having to live without lots of trappings of wealth, such as travel, entertainment, and security, is not really the biggest issue, although this is very disappointing. The real problem and fear inside me comes because I worry that without all my wealth and privilege, I will not be considered a man. My feeling of manhood is found in all the trappings of wealth." At Christmas card time, I get all the Christmas cards with people's trips to Greece and people's trips to Italy, and you know those cards, you get them. If I sent that card out, it would be me at the grocery store, me at the mailbox, but instantly when I get those cards, I go, I'm not measuring up. I did not take my family to Alaska or New York or Hawaii. There's a quote on page 20 by Henry David Thoreau, and Thoreau says this, that men live a life of quiet desperation. Simmons says men so often define themselves based on what they do, who they know, and what they own. We are so confused. We think that's success. We set ourselves up because we don't really know what we want. I like the little story on page 22 and 23 of the guy whose financial well-being has declined, and he measures himself based on his savings. You know, read and follow that story again. It leads to this quote on page 23. Does our self-worth go up and down with the market or with our paychecks? You know, that's insane. But the answer to that is yes, it does. Keller says on page 25, Tim Keller, a minister in New York, says, "We are the first culture in history where men define themselves solely by performing and achieving in the workplace. It is the way you become somebody and feel good in your life." That paragraph below that, Simmons adds this, "Once we conform to the standards of this audience, we let them determine how well we are doing in our assigned role and define how successful we are in life." On page 26, there's a great quote. It says, "A person gets his identity in life based on how the most important person in his life sees him." Now, read that again. You get your identity from how the most important person in your life sees you or how you think they see you. For a child, he says it's the parent, it could be a colleague, it could be a wife, but the question comes quickly, who's the most important person in your life? And once again, we must have lost our minds when we define ourselves like that. But that is exactly the way we do it. So to close part A, before we get to part 2, I want you to ask and answer these questions. Which is a stronger pull on men? Which of these 3 pull stronger on men? What do you do? Who do you know? What do you own? Discuss that. Second, how would you define masculinity? How would you define manhood? And add to that discussion, how do you define success? Thirdly, who is the most important person in your life? Do you try to impress that person? And why? Finally, what makes you feel good about your life? When it all comes down to it, what makes you feel good about your life? I hope you're beginning to build some ideas for yourself on who you are and what we should be, and what a true measure of a man should be. So we'll see you next time.